For the second time in 4 years, Joe Burrow's season comes to an end in Week 11. Mike Petraglia outside Paycor Stadium. You can see behind me and all around me, it's gloomy, and that is very appropriate because here on Friday morning, Joe Burrow and the Bengals got the bad news. A torn ligament in his right wrist, an acute injury, Zach Taylor termed it during his press conference here Friday afternoon. An acute injury that will likely require surgery. Joe Burrow's season is over after just 10 games. The Bengals, of course, dropped the game on Thursday night in which he injured that right wrist. They lost 34-20 to the Baltimore Ravens. Of course, Burrow, ironically, his last pass of the 2023 season, a 4-yard swing pass to Joe Mixon out in the flat that Mixon scored on. So Joe Burrow's final pass of the season was a touchdown pass. But after the pass was completed, TV replays clearly showed Joe Burrow bent over in agony and pain. He obviously went to the tent, went in, got examined there, then went to the locker room, and then on Friday morning had his right wrist examined, and it revealed a torn ligament in his right wrist. And here on Friday afternoon, Joe Burrow, as he always is, given everything he's been through the last 3 years, the last 4 years, if you go back to the ACL also in Week 11, very philosophical. It's football. It's tough. Yes, it's tough, but it's football. It's the life we live, and we have to accept that every once in a while we're going to have injuries, and sometimes those injuries end your season, and that was the case here on Friday morning when Joe Burrow and the Bengals got the bad news. Full confidence, though, in backup Jake Browning, who assumes the starter's role. Jake Browning and Joe Burrow, very similar, according to Burrow, very similar personalities. Both have a very good command of the offense. Really what it's going to come down to is the technical execution. Can Jake Browning deliver those passes that Joe Burrow has often done on time and with great precision? That really will be the difference in whether or not Jake Browning can rally the troops, at least offensively. Obviously, the Bengals have to rally the troops defensively. They've been very poor in their last several games. They've got to stop the bleeding. They gave up 400 yards again on Thursday night. Big reason they lost that game. But back to Joe Burrow, I asked him about the much ballyhooed social media posts and the video on Prime Video, the network that carried the game on Thursday night, showing that wrap / brace / compression sleeve. Joe Burrow here on Friday called it a compression sleeve. It was on his right hand, but it had nothing, he said, to do with the wrist injury that eventually happened the play before he threw that 4-yard touchdown pass. So that's the 411 on Joe Burrow's right wrist. It's not good news. And frankly, when he left the building on Thursday night after the game in Baltimore, we all kind of suspected it was probably not going to be good when lip readers across the nation read him saying he heard a pop. And when you hear a pop or a snap, usually that is some type of ligament tear. And indeed, the bad news came via MRI here on Friday morning. Well, Zach Taylor not only spoke a great deal of length about the confidence he has in the makeup in the team. He's excited to see how this team plays going forward without Joe Burrow. Obviously, he would have loved to have seen Joe Burrow come back and play, but he is very confident in the character and the makeup of the team to pick everybody up. This is a different situation, a different roster than it was in 2020 when the Bengals were 2-7-1 and lost Joe Burrow to the ACL. It's a 5-5 team. Yes, they are in last place in the AFC North, but Zach Taylor believes the character is there to band together and make a run for the playoffs. Joe Burrow said the same thing. I love my teammates, and I have full faith that they will make a playoff run. But Zach Taylor, at the end of his press conference, before he got up and left, he turned around and went back to the podium very briefly and said, I want to clear the record and make it clear that I think the national perspective and the national narrative on Logan Wilson knocking out 3 Baltimore Ravens as a dirty player is reckless. He was very upset with the national narrative out there that Logan Wilson did anything wrong. He was actually asked that question by a reporter after the game Thursday night, and he had to take a couple of takes to see if he was hearing the reporter correctly, and clearly he wanted to say something, but kind of bit his tongue. Well, here on Friday afternoon, he did not bite his tongue. He called the national narrative reckless, and he stood up for his player. One of the big reasons that Zach Taylor is very popular inside that locker room. He definitely has his players back, and certainly in this particular case, Logan Wilson appreciates it very much. Well, that's the bad news here on Friday. The Bengals must move forward. They'll, of course, have the mini bye this weekend. No game for them on Sunday afternoon. They will have a week and a couple of days to get ready for the Pittsburgh Steelers here at Paycor on November 26th. Obviously, goes without saying, it's going to be a pretty critical game if the Bengals are going to make any playoff run in the final 7 games of the season. We'll have you completely covered on clnscincy.com. Follow me on Twitter X, as always, at Trags, Trags, and be sure to check out the latest Bengal videos on my YouTube page at Jungle Roar Pod. It's youtube.com/@Jungle Roar Pod. Outside Paycor Stadium, Mike Petraglia, CLNS Media.